AEW becoming a thing in 2019
changed
the entire course of my podcast. Early that year, when AEW was announced in January of 2019, I was friendly with Chris Jericho. I had him on the show maybe 4 or 5 months before. I just shot him a message and said, hey, I see that you're doing a live podcast about 4 hours from where I live. I was living in Florida at the time. If I came there and did an interview with you, would you make the time? And he's like, oh, sure. If you'd be willing to drive up here, we can do it. We did it in the back seat of his car. It was the first interview that he ever did after announcing he was with AEW. So it was a massive interview, did millions of views. So that kind of was like the first domino in a huge year for me, because I did the Chris Jericho interview. Then I did an interview with Tony Khan, and he'd only done 2 interviews at that point, Jericho being one of them. Did the other one with me. Then I did an interview with Cody Rhodes before Double or Nothing. So you're getting all these big players in AEW. And if you remember in WWE at that time, there was a lot of people that were not fans of the product.
Yeah.
And AEW was coming in at the perfect time of like, people were very discontent with what was going on in WWE. Here's this new thing that's going to provide an alternative. We're very excited about this.
Right.
So I interviewed not only those big names, I also had the Young Bucks on the show, and then I did Darby Allin and Kip Sabian and Luchasaurus, all of these huge names, Jungle Boy at the time, all these big names in AEW that people didn't really know about.
Right.
So they were coming to my podcast, coming to my YouTube channel just to find out a little bit more about their favorite AEW stars. That changed things dramatically for me. And I was doing all of my interviews in person. So instead of just clicking a button and opening up a Zoom window, I was flying to wherever they were, sitting down with them, having a genuine conversation, looking them in the eye, shaking their hand, giving them a hug. And I think that dynamic really changed it too.
That's interesting. And on that though, what would you say to someone like that's listening to this, that's a fan of yours and maybe wants to emulate what you're doing, maybe can't afford to fly out to all these things though, to do that in person?
And I get that. I totally appreciate that, and I totally get that. Start where you're at.
Right.
And that's not just for podcasting. That's not just for content creation. With whatever your dream is in life, start with where you're at and what's in front of you right now.
Right.
I was using miles on airlines to fly a lot of the times. I would fly in the morning, do the interview, and then fly back that night so I wouldn't have to pay for a hotel. So if you're able to do it and your credit score is good enough, open up a credit card that's going to give you 50,000 free miles, which is like 2 free flights on American or United or Southwest or whatever it happens to be. Leverage that as much as you can.
Yeah.
And work with those opportunities that are in front of you too. If someone is willing to say yes, do whatever you can to make that happen. That was a really big thing for me. That interview with Chris Jericho was great, but I also spent like almost 9 hours in the car that day, 4-ish hours there, 4-ish hours back. I had my friend driving my car on the way back so I could edit the interview as we were driving. Like, I was putting in a lot of work to just make sure this stuff could go up.
Why did you have to edit it on the way back?
I wanted it to go up quickly.
You wanted to put it up
It
right
was,
away.
His first interview.
You wanted to get out next day.
I wanted to get this up as quickly as possible.
Right.
And then when Tony Khan agreed to do an interview with me at the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium at TIAA Bank Field, I was like, absolutely. It's about 5 hours from where I live, but I'll drive there, do a half-hour interview, and then drive right back. And I think there's a lot of people that would rather look for an excuse as to why not to do it than rather look for the reasons like why it could work. And for me, that was a big thing of like, well, what if I could take a vacation day here, ask my friend who's hopefully off to come with me to shoot this. I was just looking for any way to make this work.